will.
Sign that.
All right. Is that your good side?
That's my good side.
Okay, excellent.
Right, as good as it gets right there. So let me just go ahead and
Yep,
start?
go ahead whenever you are ready.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the board for the opportunity to present today. And very glad to have Mr. John Cochran with me as CFO and our site director here in Norwalk, Jessica Dickman. And we're very glad to present a proposal, at least an introductory statements with regard to proposal for the Women's Recovery House. And there are several things I'd just like to share briefly with you. And the first is the obvious problem that this project addresses, and that is that when a person begins the process of recovery, it's a cultural change, moving from a lifestyle that encompasses addiction to one of recovery. And if people, places, and things do not change during the process of recovery, then the likelihood of relapse is very high. And when I first came into the process of facilitating recovery housing, and of course we have the two houses in Willard, Ohio, I wasn't necessarily sold on the concept of bringing a number of men, in this case, into the same house, hoping and believing that they're going to help each other toward recovery. But it didn't take very long before I began to understand how critical and helpful that it is. But from the standpoint that oftentimes there's a vicious cycle that occurs, and that is that in this case, men who would go into recovery, primarily rehab facility, and would do maybe 60 to 120 days, get clean, come out, do fairly well. But then one of the things that they mentioned to me, almost to a man, as to why recovery housing was helpful, was because once they got back to work and they got money in their pocket, that ultimately was the trigger, along with being right back in the same place, working and being around the same people, doing the same things, that it ultimately ended up in relapse, and they would repeat that cycle again and again. And what they said to me left an imprint. And not only that, but I became a great advocate and have a real passion for recovery housing, because what they said to me was that this provides a safe haven, provides for me an opportunity, an atmosphere of safety. And that's the second, and so that's the problem. And now the second point is the purpose and the vision for the recovery house. And this, of course, the same principle that we just talked about is important for women who are seeking recovery as well. And so the level 2 women's recovery house that we are proposing will provide a safe and healthy living environment for 8 women that will promote abstinence from alcohol and other drugs, an enhancement for participation and retention in clinical treatment. One of the things that we have done at House of Hope for the men is when they first come in, the expectation that they're going to continue on at the level of care that their ASAM diagnosis indicates, and level of care. And so we also will be able to provide for these 8 women beneficial services that include peer support and accountability, valuable relapse prevention skills, a connection to case management to help them with the other needs that they present, an emphasis on employment, gainful employment, personal budget budget management skills training, and ultimately then a pathway for transitioning to living independently and productively in the community. And so the process, so the problem, the purpose, and the process really begins with excellent leadership. And there are three important leadership positions that are essential to the fulfillment of the vision and mission that we have outlined in our proposal and in terms of it actually being realized. And the first is a project manager. And the project manager's job duties include the management of the housing project according to the Ohio Recovery Housing Policies, the supervision of the senior resident who obviously then lives in the house, and also then will be working with participants as needed toward recovery success. So the project manager is a key player, a key personnel in terms of helping the recovery housing project that we have proposed be a success. And then secondly, the senior resident. And their job duties typically include living, of course, in the house, being and paying close and good attention to their own recovery, oversees the residents who are living out their recovery, and is therefore responsible for providing structure and guidance and encouragement to those that are participating. And of course, then they would report directly to the project manager, who serves as their supervisor. And then finally, the Norwalk office site director, who we have with us here today. And Jessica has experience in residential care for AOD clients, and I'm going to ask her to share just a little bit of that background with you, because I think it's essential. And so you see the qualifications there, but the job duties generally include supervision of the project manager, and because she has a scope of practice in AOD treatment, it really provides the professionalism and the oversight of making critical decisions with regard to placement to make sure that the right folks are being placed as residents in the program. And then finally, the program expectations. So we have the problem, the purpose, the process, and then now the expectations. And someone has said, much wiser than I, but I agree, you can expect what you inspect. And a part of the success of the House of Hope, or Men's houses, has been the incorporation of these expectations that are frequently and often reiterated to them as being very important in terms of living out their recovery. And I just want to share those with you. And what we say to them is, because House of Hope is a recovery house, there are very important expectations for all who live here. The list of expectations below are crucial to the success of your recovery journey. And here they are. There are 8. A commitment to participation in addiction and mental health treatment in accordance with your level of care determined by a licensed professional. And so that is an important expectation. All of these are. Secondly, a commitment to participation in a minimum of 5 approved addiction recovery support groups per week, and then documentation required. Now that's a high hurdle, but what we find is that filling their days, their evenings with meaningful recovery activity is incredibly important, and getting them to be a part of those meetings has been a real source of strength and provision of and development of community. Thirdly, a commitment to be aware of and follow all house rules as agreed to at the time of admission. That those are not just documents that are in a notebook somewhere, but that those are reviewed often, and the expectation is equally laid out that that is what keeps this a safe place. And the expectation is that we all will be aware and that we all will follow them. Number 5, a commitment to pay monthly rent payment as agreed to at the time of admittance. Now, we consider that a part of recovery because, taking responsibility for oneself and participating in that process, we think is an important part of them helping them to regain that element of responsibility for themselves. And so it's not so much, the money is important to keep the program going, but the money really is secondary to the element of responsibility in that respect. Number 6, a commitment to become gainfully employed. Meaningful work is an important part of recovery. And we believe that, so that and again, these are all compatible to working with the women and the proposal that we have before you. But our expectation is that when a person comes, the first and greatest responsibility is their stability in their recovery. So when a person comes in, if they're in early recovery and they need IOP, for instance, intensive outpatient treatment, which is 9 hours a week of treatment, then if it comes between making a choice to get the job that will keep them away from the level of care that they need, we opt to say, let's work on your recovery element first, get that stabilization there, and then we will assist and help you get that job. But what we find is if we send individuals into the workplace too soon and they're not stable enough, sometimes those work environments have their own pockets of instability that can sometimes trigger relapse. And so we want to make sure that these individuals are ready to send them into the workplace and to be successful. But everybody, we have the expectation that if you're able to work and you're stable in your recovery, that you will seek a job, because we believe that that is an important part of recovery. A commitment to give back to the community that we live in by providing voluntary community service as called upon. One of the things that I can say in terms of our Willard project for the men is the importance of the appearance of the houses, the behavior of the men, wherein they understand the good neighbor policy and they commit to that. We take that very seriously, but along with that, the men have a responsibility, and we would again translate this into the women's house, where we would want them to volunteer. No one's forced to do so, but we seek to encourage them to volunteer to do work in the community that will help others. And it's a way to give back and a way to say thank you to the community for the provision that is being given to them. And then finally, is a commitment to the others that live in the house to be an encouragement and an example of solid recovery principles. A commitment to refrain from behaviors that are detrimental to others who live in the house, the house for recovery. And so I wanted to share these with you because when you break it down to the daily activity of what makes, I think, a recovery house successful, is these 8 commitments that we strive to reinforce every day. And so with that, if I know I've probably exceeded my 15 minutes.
You're good.
Okay, but I would like to give Jessica an opportunity to talk about, since she would be a very key player and a personnel, if she would talk about her background with recovery housing.
So prior to coming on with Family Life Counseling, I worked with NORA, the Northern Ohio Recovery Association, who was contracted over at Genesis by the Lake in Vermillion. That's a women's recovery house out there. So it was my position was to kind of facilitate the daily operations of the house. There were, I want to say 12 condo units, and each one had 4 women in it. At any given time, I had between 24 and 28 women. And a lot of them had their families with them as well, because of Genesis, you're allowed to have your children with you. And we work very closely with entities like Children's Services, probation, things like that, to meet those requirements so that they could reunite with their families. Really, at the end of the day, it was about meeting these clients where they are. Like Dr. B said, where these women are all gonna come in at different stages. Some of them are gonna be ready to go out and get employment. Maybe they're just coming out of, 90, 120-day residential treatment facility. They're gonna be in a different place than somebody who's been sober for 30 days and is still struggling a little bit. And so really it's about sitting down with all of these women when they come in and figuring out, where are you? What do you need? What can we help you with? If we need to help you with a higher level of care like IOP, then let's do that. At minimum though, all of the clients, and this is something I did at Genesis and something I would carry through here, at minimum they'll all receive case management services. Just because the case manager is going to be able to facilitate things like employment and budgeting. A lot of these folks, when they're in early recovery, they've been neglecting their health for a very long time. So, getting appointments at the Huron County Health Department or whatever we need to do with and for them to just kind of facilitate their growth and help them learn how to be sober. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to potentially do this. I had 6 staff that worked under me when I was at Genesis, from BHTs to CDCAs. So just knowing that it is really a team effort, and getting all of these ladies to get on that team for themselves. And that's really what we're there to do. Because as you guys know, a lot of them are coming from environments that are just really, really unhealthy. So providing that healthy housing environment is where it starts, right? The space around you is really where it starts. So allowing them to have a safe, comfortable, sober space that they can start to learn and grow in, and just allowing ourselves to facilitate that in any way we can.
One other element, and I know there's going to be an opportunity for questions, is, and it might seem like not that important in the whole scheme of things, but it is, and that is the cleanliness of the house. One of the things that, along with the outside and having a sense of pride about the way that the house looks, is also the cleanliness of the house inside. And because they all have chores, the residents have chores to share, that becomes a very important element too. But this is you're a part of a family in a sense, and all of us have our responsibilities, and when we all do our part, then we can really keep this place looking like someplace where we really want to live. And my understanding is, I haven't been in a lot of recovery houses, but that's not always the case, that recovery houses have levels of cleanliness, and we just think that that's an important element, even though sometimes you might not mention something like that in the context of a recovery house, but it really is. So, ready for any questions that you might ask?
Thank you. Mitch, do you have any questions? All right.
So how does I'm new to the board.
Sure.
So I have not a lot of knowledge on how this works.
Yes.
Is there any other funding for this, or is it just through MHOS?
Well, basically, the funding typically would come in addition to the MHOS funding, is the rent that is paid.
Okay. And I was looking at that, is it $68 a month per resident? Because I was kind of
$300.
$300, okay. Just always like $6,600, I think, for the year is what the proposal said. And if you have 8 people divided by 12, that was another question. How long do they stay there for? That's what I don't know. Also.
Well, that is an undetermined length of stay, because every person is individual, and of course we know that. But to say that you're going to be here for 12 months and then you have to move, if that person needs 13 months or 14 months. So it really is dependent upon the person, but we do lay out, that a bit of a timeline, an idea that we would really like to see, see a person meet their goals and get to a place where they're able to transition into more of an independent living within that year.
Okay. The senior resident is something I have questions about. I don't know how it works, like, how does it work at the other places that you're at? Because to me, this seems like there wouldn't be a lot of people that would volunteer for something like this. And I know they get paid a certain amount of money, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people that would volunteer for this, especially if they have families and they're sober already, why they would come into a house and want to do this to other people. And I understand there are people that want to do that, but I would feel like the pickings are pretty slim.
Well, what we have found is, and we do a mentoring process, and it's really interesting how it happens. That you get individuals that come into the house, and then it's like any other organization, the cream rises to the top, and you get individuals within the context of living in the house that really demonstrate a seriousness in terms of their own recovery. And what we do with our current house is then we begin to mentor them, giving them small responsibilities. And so sort of out of the mix of the current house. So you're right that sometimes it's very difficult in going out and recruiting somebody to come and do that. So our backup plan is, having maybe that first, I'm just talking strategically about how we would do this with this proposal, is if we had difficulty finding someone, would be to work on getting residents for the house and then begin the process of figuring out who might be someone who would be helpful. It would definitely be someone who is further along in their recovery and show that they are serious and could be trusted with some of that element of responsibility.
And there's one in Willard, correct? A women's house in Willard already? Is that for you guys or is this for somebody else?
That's through someone else. We have 2 men's houses.
Would there be a way for you guys to work with maybe that women's house in order to find somebody who's like
Sure.
pretty much close to being done there and be like, hey, we would love you to come over here and kind of mentor the people that are gonna be coming into this house?
Sure, that's a great question, and in fact, we do some networking in that way. The group, the Recovery Housing Network of providers is a fairly small group. They do get together, and so then when individuals maybe they have someone, just like you're saying, that shows interest, but they don't have a place for them, but they would recommend them.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We work very closely with like Becky's house in Sandusky, which is run by Road to Hope, and then Margot House and things like that. So just being able to have those connections and interact with those folks, both on a supervisory level and in terms of their clientele, I think will help that quite a bit as well.
And I saw that you have to have a background check for them. Is it just violent stuff that you look for in a background check? Because I know a lot of people who use drugs have some sort of criminal record for the most part.
Right, what we're looking for is any kind of violence that may be indicative of maybe a pattern of, domestic violence, those kinds of things that we would want to do.
Okay, that makes sense. The 14-day sober, so I know that if we have somebody who comes into the sheriff's office and says, I need help, we contact through MHAS, and then they send somebody here to the office to pick them up. Would you guys go for people that are doing that? Because I know like 14 days sober, somebody's not gonna sit at home for 14 days and wait to get sober, so that's.
If you look at the level 2 guidelines, the general guidelines that Ohio Recovery Housing Place they state around 30 days. What we found at the House of Hope in Willard is that's too long. Because again, 30 days is a long time for a person that's waiting. So what we do is we individualize that. And what we do is we screen individuals based upon the following. One, we don't want anyone that's physically or medically unstable, okay? So we want to know that they're medically cleared. We want to know that in terms of, serious and significant withdrawal has passed. But we take every situation based upon the individual's situation. And now what we do is that's just a general 14 days. I basically am concerned that if we were to not place any guideline there, that they would, that we might be considered something more than a level 2. But we realize where the rubber meets the road, that when you have that person sitting there because they have been clean 13 days, and they're ready to go, and they're saying, I'm ready to go, that we're not going to turn them down just because they don't meet that 14-day requirement. So I think you're right on the money when you're thinking that, we have to be, we want to avoid putting someone in a dangerous position medically. But at the same time, we want to be ready to meet people where they are and help them.
Do you seek people out and give them the interest in it, or would they have to be willing? I know this is a voluntary program, which you can't force somebody to get help if they don't want it. I understand that. Would you seek people out and put a bug in their ear? Like, I know we have obviously females at the jail who are, if they're there for 30 days or something like that, they're gonna be getting out and going back to the same crap that they were in before. Do you guys ever go there and meet with the individuals at the jail to let them know that this is an option, especially if beds are open?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
They go ahead.
Yeah, I do have 2 of my team members that go out to the jail. We also, I know Ashley was providing, those who were getting released from the jail with resource bags, and all of our information is in there as well. Obviously, if this is something we would take on, we would be sure to include this information in those resource bags so that they know this is something that you can do. And again, also my team members are in there whenever they're able.
Okay.
I know, it's been a little bit scarce trying to get in and out of there these days due to COVID, but the minute we were able to get back in there, we were right there. So.
And I don't know a lot of the stuff that goes on in the jail anymore, the programs and stuff that are in there, because I'm on the roadside, so I don't get to see a lot of the programs and stuff that are in the jail as much. When I first worked at the sheriff's office, I worked in the jail for 1.5 years, so I got to see a lot of those programs, but that was 8 years ago, so I don't even know I don't know what's in there anymore, so.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it, is just letting people know that this is available. I mean, people don't know what they don't know. So once they're aware and we can put that bug in their ear, then they know they can let us know what they need. And some of them too, I remember days out at Genesis, nights out at Genesis, where folks would just say, oh, well, this is sober living. So somebody would just drop them off. Their sponsor would just drop them off. I remember one in particular, this woman was pregnant and detoxing hardcore, and they just dropped her off on the doorstep, and it was like, ooh, okay. But again, we're screening all of these people as they come in, and so we're gonna meet them where they are. What is it that you need? That particular individual needed detox. So we figured it out and we got her to detox. But we're not gonna keep people that aren't appropriate for that level of care, but we're also not gonna turn around and say, oh, well, we can't help you. We'll figure it out.
One of the things that we have done with and I'm referencing back just because that's my best experience in terms of facilitation of a recovery house, is we actually go into the jail and do the evaluation or the interview, which, we call it, that's a big step toward acceptance. If they go in, if the person has a discharge date, they're gonna be discharged, their probation officer indicates that the next step for them, they would like for them to consider going to a recovery house.
Okay.
And they get a hold of us, we're more than glad to come and do the interview right there, so that as soon as they walk out the door, they can go to the recovery house. We've done that a number of times.
Awesome. I don't think I have any questions at the moment. Oh, that's all I have.
Okay, I have a bunch, so.
Okay, you go right ahead.
So first, actually, I had a couple of statements. So one is the location of the property. So the home is located within 1 mile of the school zone.
Mhm.
So there will be some additional exclusionary criteria that you will have to add to that,
Sure.
as well as some type of waiver and conversation that's gonna have to happen with every client of be aware of this, be aware that drug charges are increased, just making sure they know what they're walking into.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure I said that. So I know it had said in multiple places in the proposal that residents will have access to the treatment provider of choice. How will you ensure that's the case, that there aren't direct referrals or strong recommendations to one to make sure it's in compliance with
Right.
ORH?
And that's important, and we take that very seriously, so that when someone comes, because treatment is an important part of being a part of a recovery house. It's not mandated, but we strongly encourage. What we do is we communicate to them upfront that they have their choice of treatment. There have been a number of men, for instance, in Willard, that came to us and they already had a provider. We don't require them to switch providers. What we do is we give them access to, the transportation to get them there. We let them know up front that there are other providers in the community, and we are more than glad to facilitate their getting connected with them. However, at the same time, we let them know that Family Life is more than glad to serve them. But they may, for whatever reason, have a preference, and we facilitate that. So in terms of, that's our track record. So we do that. Now, it may be that the services that they're receiving somewhere else, that there is a service gap. What we seek to do at that point then is to work with that provider and say, you're doing this element of their recovery, maybe they're doing their IOP. Can we work together with respect to maybe providing some case management or other type services to kind of fill the gap, because we're right there with them. So that's the way we've managed that in the past. But you're right, that's an important, they don't lose choice. And just because we're a provider and we facilitate services doesn't mean that they have to have those services provided by us.
Thank you. Any legal charges that disqualify acceptance into the home?
The short answer is the only charge that may make it very difficult for us because of the good neighbor policy is if someone has an aggravated sexual assault charge.
Any kind of sexual, if they're a sexual offender?
Right.
Okay.
Because, and especially in Willard, we're very careful about that. So that is a disqualifier. And it's not so much that, we don't feel like we could accept someone and work with them, but it's more because of the community. Now, of course, it's not to say that in a women's house that you might not have, it happens, but it probably would be less of an issue. But basically, that's the arena that is probably more exclusionary than anything else. The fact that a person has a felony.
What about felony domestic violence?
And again, it wouldn't be an automatic disqualifier. We'd really want to work with that person to determine what the circumstance was, to know if this is a proclivity that's related to some kind of undercurrent mental health issue, or was it a one-time situation that got out of control and so forth, and it's a part of their history. But we're not anticipating that they're going to be a risk to the current residents or the community.
Thank you. Next one, I guess, is a statement as well. I apologize. So there are a couple of things on this budget, and if the board moves forward with Family Life for this proposal, we'll go over this. The board will pay the utilities for the building, since the board owns the building. You know what I mean? The board would be giving you money to pay the utilities anyway. So it's, figuring that out. And then there are some things on here, furnishings, things like that will be covered through the capital funding through the state. So there are some of the things that wouldn't be on here, but again, we can pick that apart piece by piece. How are medications handled if there are no staff on site in the evenings? And are there certain medications that would be disqualifiers, such as Suboxone or methadone or insulin in, and
Right. Well,
Any prescription narcotic.
yeah, what we do in Willard with the Men's House is each individual has a lockbox And so what we do is we say if someone's coming in with any kind of medication, is Lacra medication, keep it there. We haven't at this point accepted Suboxone clients there, but the stipulation with the board is that that would not be a disqualifier for the women's house. It's going to give us an opportunity, and there are other houses that permit that. So it's a bit of a learning curve for us, but we can work with that, and we will. We will go along with that. The reason is because we know historically the abusive nature of that some, having that on site makes it a challenge. But what we have done, and it's a bit invasive, but I think it has been good. If a person has an addictive medication of some sort, if they're pain medications or whatever because of a physical problem, what we have done is work together with the resident to even do pill counts and that kind of thing, because we want to help them. And so if a person has for instance, a pain medication and they're taking it because a doctor's prescribed it, and they're supposed to take 1 or 2 a day, we want to help guard that, because we know that could be a trigger for use, having that available. So we ask them to voluntarily, allow us to work with them in that regard.
Do you monitor them taking the pill as they go in? Because I know we've had issues in the past. We stopped like narcotics in the jail, any prescription narcotics, because people were hiding them and pocketing them in their cheeks and stopping them from people.
Yeah, well, yes, and so we've had a few men who struggled with that. What we've done is we have, and again, this has all been voluntary, that we don't distribute medication, but what we do is we say, okay, you're having a difficulty with this, okay? The pill count doesn't add up, all right, we know that we're having a problem, okay? So here's what we'll do, okay, if you agree, okay, and again, so you negotiate it with them, is, we're gonna keep the pills locked up, and then when it's time for you to take your pills, you come and we will watch you take that, make sure you don't cheek it or, put it under your tongue.
Okay.
And then we put it away, So there are ways of doing it that is, I think is more of a cooperative kind of effort with the person. If they're serious about their recovery, I think they'll comply.
What if they tell you to go pound salt? And I'm gonna keep my medication.
That's a problem, okay, and yeah, that would be a problem, and, we would have to, deal with that. We, fortunately, the individuals that we have had medications with, they've been willing to work with us. And we've tightened down pretty hard sometimes.
Do the residents get drug tested?
Yes.
What happens if they fail?
Well, if they fail, and we've had to do this, if they fail, then what we do is we tell them that your current level of care is not matching the need. And I'll tell you why we came to this conclusion, okay? Therefore, okay, it is criteria for discharge, okay? We have to take that very seriously, because if we don't, that spreads like wildfire. If Sally gets a free pass, she relapsed, but we don't work with her, to deal with this relapse. And someone else has, then you have an inequality issue. So what we do is we don't fire clients, we don't give up on them, we don't kick anybody to the curb. What we do is we sit down with them and we say, okay, you tested positive, okay, that indicates a relapse. Now here's what we would like to do. It is apparent that your current level of care is not matching your need. So what we would like for you to do is to be willing to go to maybe a more intensive short-term treatment. Go and be assessed. We'll get them transportation there. We will help them get there. Go and get assessed, and whatever they say, okay, we take ourselves, whatever that professional says that you need, then we want you to fulfill that. And if you fulfill that successfully and you get your certificate, then you are welcome back to the house. So we don't quit on anybody. Not until, till they're safely someplace else, we don't quit.
Okay, sorry to move along this, and I apologize. Under admissions criteria, it states residents must have adequate resources to pay for the program or work to attain that goal within 3 months. So one of the things, the funding from the board will be for up to 6 months.
Right.
With the intent of, for some people, 3 months may be appropriate if they just complete a 120-day program, but for others, if I'm coming in and I have 14 days sobriety, in 3 months, I may still be going through a lot of the physical symptoms of withdrawing and, fully detoxing from everything, so I may not be ready yet.
Exactly, that gives us, and we're very appreciative of that, because that gives us some flexibility. Now, one of the problems that we had was that's seemingly at first collided with our work criteria. In other words, we expect people to work, and if they're working, then they should be paying rent. But what we decided to do is, even though there's funding available, that if there's still the potential for them to be able to SOR funds or whatever, then what we do is we simply encourage them to take a budgeting class and say, you know what, these dollars are there for your rent, you're working now, because if they meet that requirement, we want them to work. We want them to work. And so they can still go and work and fulfill that part of but that other $300 that they would have, to pay, now they can put it in a savings account, they can pay for other necessities. But the only thing that we say is, okay, we would like, and they should do it anyway, but we all should actually, right, is we have a budgeting class that we want you to take, and then we feel like we've done a bit of our due diligence with regard to that. Because money for these individuals is a real trigger. Once they get money in their pocket, it's really tough.
Have you guys thought about doing like the Dave Ramsey program with your residents? Since they're kind of starting out fresh, I mean, and they really don't have a lot of credit and that sort of stuff, or credit cards racked up that they've been.
I'm not
Yes, sir.
familiar with that program. I know when I was at Genesis, we had some different things that we worked with the clients with in regards to having almost like a payee set up, where they had that financial support. Obviously, as an agency, or for myself or my team as clinicians, we cannot be responsible for your finances for you. We can help you, we can educate you, we can even make that a mandatory part of being in the house, is this budgeting class. However, we can't do it for you. Having, incorporating their families, incorporating, rebuilding bridges for them to kind of get people who love and have all this hope for them and support them is one of the things that I tried really hard to do with my girls then. Because if I can get you that support that's going to sustain you, I'm temporary. The minute you come into this house, we should be planning for your discharge, kind of. What do we need to do? What does that look like? It doesn't need to be in 12 months, maybe it doesn't need to be in 16 months. We're not gonna put a timestamp on it, but we're gonna say we wanna meet these goals, right? If we fall back and we relapse or we struggle in some sort of way, then we go back and redo the plan. Part of that does need to be that financial piece, and if there's, a program that's local to Huron County or anything like that, I would definitely be open to exploring that. But I'm familiar with using certain programs in the past, like a payee type program, to kind of help them have some responsibility, but not have all of the responsibility all at once as they're trying to kind of get their bearings.
It's a budgeting class that Dave Ramsey teaches, and it's like through a CD, and they have workbooks and stuff, and they can sit down for like an hour a night or an hour a week even, and just go through the budgeting class, and I don't even know how long it is, like 10 or 12 weeks, I think, something like that.
Nice.
I'm a Dave Ramsey grad.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've done in the past is, and it's phenomenal what some people will do and what different agencies and entities will do if you just ask. But I worked really closely with my IOP girls previously with, I wanna say it was KeyBank. And I just went to them one day and talked to their branch manager, and I said, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is the population I serve. finances and numbers are not my specialty, but I want to help these girls. And they came in and once a week for, I think it was like 6 weeks, they met with the girls for an hour and gave them all these resources and educated them on things like credit and, you know, a lot of the things that some folks just aren't learning right now. So just gave them that educational piece, and they were more than happy to do it. I mean, they have financial educators that are like, yeah, we want people to be smart with their money. So it's really about reaching out, and even if it's not something I can provide or one of my team members can provide, I'll get you what you need, and working with the community to fit that need.
It's very interesting how, you know, for some folks, some of the men, and I keep referring back to that because of experience, but some of them come in and they say, I can't handle that money. I cannot. And so we work with them. Maybe it's their mother, maybe it's you know, somebody, then they actually, the check goes to them. We don't facilitate that. They just arrange that with their employer, and it gets directly deposited in an account that, you know, that they can't access, and that's their recovery decision. But we're very careful about that. Loaning money to each other, that's a bad idea. You know, so you have to monitor all of those kinds of things because money is a trigger.
So my wife takes care of that stuff.
It's triggered for some people that aren't even, you know, in recovery.
Right, yeah. True.
What happens if a woman were to become pregnant or is admitted to the program pregnant?
That of course is, I'm gonna defer.
There are, obviously it would, again, we as a team are going to meet these women where they are. If you come in and you're pregnant, depending on what your level of care needs are, have you been sober for 10 days? We might need to look at something like the Key, or something like that in Lorraine, that's gonna be a more intensive that can detox you and your baby safely. We don't ever want to put anybody at risk in any way, shape, or form. But maybe they're coming in and they're, let's say, on Subutex, because that's that's what they put all the pregnant women on. How can we help you? Let's get some releases of information for your prescribing doctor so that we can start to work together on what this looks like. You know, a lot of these folks out there are a lot of programs out there that's an exclusion. If you're pregnant, sorry, I can't help you. It's not helpful. So really kind of just finding out what their exact needs are, but again, also keeping in line our scope and what I'm capable of helping, you know, these women with. If you're coming in at a certain stage in your recovery, I would love to help you, but I have to acknowledge at some point that maybe this isn't best. And then working with them to, you know, go to the Key or go to, you know, wherever it is that I can get you in that's gonna be a little bit safer for you, and keep this recovery house in your back pocket for later.
How are the doctor's appointments paid for?
So it depends. Obviously, one of the first things we're gonna do when these women come in, if they aren't already, we're gonna try and get them Medicaid eligible. If they're pregnant, that's pretty much that's with a quickness, they're gonna be approved for Medicaid. So case management is gonna be working with them to try and get those things covered. If they're SOAR eligible, then we just worked out some collaboration with the Huron County Health Department, getting their appointments paid for, their medications paid for, you know, even if they're private insurance, that's gonna be one of the benefits to that collaboration that we just made recently, which is super exciting. But just to make sure that that appointment is covered and those medications are covered if that's what they need.
Okay, what is the average time for the application process? Because there were a lot of steps listed in the proposal. Like, is that able to be done within 24 hours, 48 hours?
I was very detailed in the process, but, and so when you look at it, it looks like, well, my goodness, that'd take a month.
Yes.
But really, it can happen very, very quickly. You know, the first step is, you know, the referral is made, we make the initial contact with that person, and give them some preliminary information about the house and so forth. If they continue to want to be interested, and of course, you know, then we would pursue an interview. All of that could take place in the same day. You know, the first contact, we receive the referral, we call them, we have that conversation. We could set up, I'm talking about how fast it could happen. You know, then an appointment would be set up for the interview. could be the next day, within a very short period of time. Then once, because the three individuals, the three staff people really are that screening committee. And so all they would need to do, once the application is filled out, is we do want to have Jessica review it just to make sure that, if there are any gaps in there, some questions maybe from a professional, skilled clinician that would like to ask questions about. But then that could happen, again, the next day. So really is a several step process, but it's not encumbered by length of time that needs to, elapse in between those steps. They're all safeguards, basically.
Historically, in my experience, what has taken the longest part of that process, because I can jump in and I can screen and I can assess and I can do those things fairly quickly. What has historically, in my experience, taken the longest amount of time is that background check. That's what typically trips us up just a little bit. So being able to collaborate
wait for that to come back.
and work with that's something that we will have to determine exactly what, if there's going to be a waiting period, contacting the sheriff's department saying, how long might this take? What is this gonna look like? We would have to determine what that waiting period would look like. There are places out there that until we get it back, you're not coming in. There's other places where we sign some, which is what we did at Genesis. You kind of temporarily came in, it was kind of like a probationary period. And then once we received the background check, then we went forth and did something a little bit more solid, a little bit more permanent. But because we know, again, we only have a small window of time for some of these clients. They come in and they have decided, they had that come to Jesus moment and they're like, oh my goodness, I want help and I want to do this right now. If we wait 24 hours, that moment might be gone, we might lose it. And we do not want to do that. We want to take advantage of those moments of clarity and get them in as soon as we can.
And if I have a felony, you know what I mean, like my background check's going to take longer, maybe 30, 45, 60 days, depending on what's on my record, and so that's a long time, then that
Right.
person's gone.
What we do in Willard is because I conducted the interviews myself, is when we get to that place, what I do is reassure them. And I say, I just need you to be honest with me here because, we don't want to delay your admission, but we need to have some element of reality in terms of what your legal background is. So when we facilitate that, what is probably going to show up? And so I would say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, we don't get any surprises. And usually the surprises are things they forgot about. They have a long rap sheet, they get forgotten something that happened years ago. That's okay. Well, we're looking for serious assaultive kinds of behaviors. And if, and again, how recently did those occur, that kind of thing. So we do get into a dialogue with them about that. And there is a section on how do you deal with anger. Okay, so we talk about that. When you're angry, have others said to you, that you have explosive anger. Okay. And that enables us to talk about them. If you become a resident of the house and you have a disagreement with someone, and they're really pushing your buttons, what might we say?
Yeah.
How will you deal with that? So we do cover that. And I don't think this has ever happened at Willard, but I don't think that we've ever had a case where we did the interview and something really bad showed up. Like if a person didn't tell us about a sexual conviction, a felony sexual type conviction, that would be a problem. And they didn't take the moment to be honest with us about that. Or if they had a recent felony assault issue. Now, the felony assault issue isn't necessarily going to disqualify them because we have to explore it.
There's also ways in this day and age, and I know I did this a lot, especially with first and foremost, the sex offender registries. I mean, we can look and pretty much everybody has access to things like that. So, I mean, those are things that we can look up,
You can do
pretty-
like what you dig into if you ask them where they used to live at.
Yeah,
And
like
you
very-
can go on the county's website and find.
right, yeah, I mean, you can do docket searches and record searches. I was very blessed and I had a connection at the sheriff's department in Erie County. So I would just call and say, hey, I need, make sure that this particular individual and that would kind of get done for me. But I have never had that experience either where it wasn't something they were willing to disclose. Typically, if folks are to the point where they're tired of being tired and they're ready, they're just gonna put it on the table and say, this is what I'm dealing with, can you help me?
But it'd be terrible to lose the opportunity because we're waiting on a report. It would be bad.
The only other questions I have left are regarding the staff positions. So senior resident, so I guess I'll just voice my concerns. So according, level 2 recovery houses are only required to have one resident or one staff member. My concerns regarding the senior resident is, are they taking one of the beds? If yes, is this a long-term position, meaning are they going to be here for years, taking one of those beds that could be serving someone else? Is this a 24/7 position, which is concerning to me if they're required to be there, working 24/7. And then the last, I think, concern is for both the senior resident and the project manager regarding, it said recommended that they have clinical licensure. And that one was a concern as to why that is needed for both, number of time or length of time sober for the senior resident. Yeah, that was that for the senior resident.
Well, and it would be actually easy to make an adjustment with that. Because of the setup of the proposed house, you got 2 units. So again, leadership sort of rises to the top. You begin to discern those that are really serious about, and so in each unit, you're gonna have those that are on a different end of the continuum. So you could have a title, a position of honor and, senior resident, but that, and the way that we did it in Willard was, Kevin started off where, he was a senior resident and his compensation was his rent. And that's, but he had the responsibility and so forth, and what he got in return was, he didn't have to pay his rent. He earned it through being a senior resident. So that could be, it could be no other compensation other than that, and it's really a position of honor and, a recognition of recovery success and that kind of thing.
Then when that person moves out, you could just, somebody
Oh,
else
yeah,
could take over.
somebody else, right, yes, and Kevin and I, for instance, are talking, for instance, when he has to go out of town, maybe he's taking a resident to a doctor's appointment, and he's gonna be gone. We have the guys, and he knows he's seeking to mentor them. So he may say, hey, Joe, I'm gonna have to be out of town for a while. Gonna be around the house, could you just look at it, and then he'll let the guys know, Joe's gonna be looking out for things here and so forth. And then the rest of the guys start to look at this person as recognizes as a potential leader, so.
So if they have to transport somebody, whose vehicle do they use?
Well, Kevin's been using his.
Okay, does he get any compensation for taking people as far as?
Yes, he
Wear
gets
and tear on
mileage, we pay mileage, and of
Okay.
course, he's a salaried position, so he does get paid for
Okay.
his time. And the wear and tear on his car.
So I think that's something, again, if the board selects Family Life, I would like to hash that out a little
Sure,
bit more.
yeah, we
because
can do
I have some serious concerns about that piece of it. And then questions regarding the project manager. So it had showed in the budget, the project manager initially starts as full-time and drops down to a 3/4 FTE. And this is a position that we would want to be full-time, to have someone there 40 hours a week. There will be an office built into one of the garages as kind of a workaround for having to give 24 hours notice. So that way, there is a place for them to be on site. But so that is something we would want to be full-time. But so yeah, I think both of those would be conversations we could have further down the line just to gather more information.
And what we were, I can tell you what our thought was, as you're trying to figure out, well, what's the rationale behind that is, and John can speak to that, but it came out of our discussion that this person could also do some clinical work through Family Life. Now, I can tell you that I think Kevin, for instance, his knowledge and his pursuit of the CDCA has been real valuable and helpful. Not only in terms of his own recovery, but also in terms of understanding, some of the biology and so forth of addiction, and it's been real helpful. So that's the reason for the qualification. We would like for that person to have some working knowledge of recovery, some working knowledge of treatment. And so we built into that the idea that they could be among and around other clinicians and providing care. But that's open to negotiation. We certainly are glad to think about it differently.
Thank you.
One of the things that we utilized at Genesis was BHTs, behavioral health techs. So, and that enabled us to have an additional, especially when we needed to have somebody there later in the evenings or in very early mornings or, whatever the case may be. So there's definitely some other ways that we could look at it if that's one of the board's concerns, is having somebody there. It's just something that we could kind of talk about, because I know there's just some different avenues and different ways that we could look at that if that's what the board would want to see.
Thank you.
I mean, looking at a senior resident, if they're gonna make $6,000 a year, if that's everything I'm reading is correct, I would think that it would be more beneficial to them to just go get a full-time job somewhere as opposed to, or a part-time job where they're gonna make more money than being a senior resident and only making $6,000 a year.
And then, there's lots of different ways of actually looking at that role in that position, all the way from it being just someone who has demonstrated, a strong recovery, and that you rotate that role among the different, the populations that you have.
Yeah, like the project manager would be somebody who's there during the daytime. If the senior resident is out working, senior resident gets their rent for free, but then they're there at nighttime with everybody. So it's like everything is pretty much covered 24/7, but that senior resident is still able to get out and do their own thing.
Right, sure.
Which is important too, because we want them to be healthy. We don't want them to live and breathe not only their own recovery, but everybody else's. We want to be able to encourage them to have that balance as well.
So what questions do you have?
I think all my questions really have been covered. And they were similar. I had some additional ones, but you covered them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was all, so thank you, sorry, I know there was a lot of questions and I apologize for the
that's
time,
good.
so I apologize for that, but we greatly appreciate you coming in,
Well,
thank you
sure, it's
very
our
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, we greatly appreciate the board, again, showing additional interest in this type of care. It's a great way to deal with the county's needs in this opiate and substance use epidemic that we're in, so we appreciate your interest in this area.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna figure out how to save this video.
Second one, we will meet and it just saves here.
Well, that's helpful now.
It literally says, when you're done.
Oh, that would